In this screencast, I will demonstrate a few techniques that you can use to tidy up your X templates, making them easier to maintain. First, I will show how inline JavaScript can be moved into member functions. Then I will demonstrate a technique that allows you to keep your X templates in HTML files, rather than declaring them inline inside of your JavaScript files. This screencast continues our look at X templates in Sencha Touch. In part 1, I introduced templates and showed how they could be dynamically updated with content from objects in your application. I discussed basic looping, conditional branching, and using the formatting functions that come bundled with Sencha Touch. If you aren't familiar with these subjects, I suggest you go back and watch the first part. This template iterates through a list of planets, outputting the name, the mass, and a list of moons for each one. In part 1, I showed how the TPL tag could be used to show content only if a condition is met. Unfortunately, placing JavaScript inside of an HTML attribute requires that you encode any characters such as greater than or less than. You can avoid this problem by moving the condition into a function and attaching it to the X template. The X template constructor can accept a configuration object as its final argument. You can place a function inside this object and call it from TPL tags using the this keyword. This example performs exactly the same test, but because it's not embedded inside an HTML attribute, there is no need to escape the greater than symbol. Here, I've updated the template so that it uses an unordered list, and I've created some styles for striping the items and drawing a line between them. To hook these styles in, I need to apply the appropriate classes. To do this, I'm going to create another member function called listClasses, which returns a string containing all appropriate classes for the current list item. Then, I just have to call this function in line from my template, passing the xIndex and xCount variables. When I refresh my browser, you'll see that the items in the list alternate in colour. Looking at the source reveals that classes alternate between odd and even, with first and last applied to the appropriate items. At the moment, each list of moons is separated with commas. I'd like this to read more like a grammatical English sentence, so that the last two items are separated with the word and instead of a comma. The logic required to do this wouldn't easily fit inside the template, so instead I'll create another member function that handles the logic. Then I just need to call the function from my template. Refreshing the page, you'll see that the moons now read more like a natural English sentence. The final argument when creating a template is a configuration object. This is where your member functions can be defined. But this itself is just an object, so it can be created outside of the template and assigned to a variable. This means that if you have helper functions that you want to use on more than one template, they can easily be shared by loading the common configuration object. Member functions provide a mechanism that enables you to reuse code between templates. They also make it possible for you to create simple conditional statements without having to HTML encode your greater and less than symbols. These properties combined allow you to better organize your X templates in a Sencha Touch project. It's convenient that X templates can be created in line from an array of strings, but it can become quite unwieldy. You have to ensure that you use the right kind of quotes, and your text editor won't be able to apply HTML syntax highlighting, or any of the other HTML-specific features that you may be used to. So wouldn't it be good if you could edit these templates in a separate HTML file, then load them in? This is possible using the xtemplate.from function. By passing the ID of an element that is available in the DOM, you can create an X template from the inner HTML of that element. So if I open up my index.html file, I can copy the HTML snippet that I was using to create my X template right in. I no longer need to use an array of strings, so I can strip out the trailing commas and the surrounding single quotes. And that looks much more maintainable already. Next, I need to wrap it in an element with a unique ID attribute. The usual go-to element in this case would be a div. It's not the best choice here, but I'll start off by using it to demonstrate why. I've given it the unique ID of example template. If I refresh my browser now, you'll see that there is a slight problem. The content inside my div element is appearing on the page. I'm going to have to hide it. Now, I could add an inline style saying display none, but the CSS that comes with Sencha Touch includes plenty of rules that I could hook into. So instead, I'll add a class of x-hidden-display. Refreshing the browser, you'll see now that the raw template code is no longer visible. Now, if I reveal the source code, you'll see that something is not quite right. The TPL tag doesn't belong in the HTML spec, and if I copy this code into an HTML validator, it throws an error. When dealing with invalid markup, the browser may not return the inner HTML exactly as it looks in the original source. A simple workaround is to replace the div tag with a text area. This is intended to capture user input, so there is no such thing as invalid markup within a text area. If I refresh the page and paste the new source code into an HTML validator, it should no longer throw any errors. Back in my JavaScript code, I want to create an X template from the HTML in my index file. Rather than using the X template constructor, I'll use the from function, passing it the ID of the element whose inner HTML I want to use in this template. When I refresh the page, you'll see that it's not working yet. The reason for this is that the X template makes a couple of calls to member functions which are not currently attached to the template. The xtemplate.from function can accept a configuration object as its final argument, just like the constructor did. So if I reuse the configuration object that was previously attached to the inline template declaration, then it should make this template work. While I'm at it, I can discard the constructed template, which considerably reduces the size of this file. I'll refresh the page, and there we go. The template has been read from the DOM, then dynamically populated with my planet data. In my index.html file, I could go ahead and add another text area containing the source for another X template. But in a collaborative project where all files are under version control, it would feel more appropriate to have the source for each template in a file of its own. Sencha Touch is a client-side JavaScript framework, so it doesn't provide any means to do this, but you could use whichever server-side technology you want to accomplish this. I'm going to demonstrate how it could be done using Sinatra, a minimal server-side framework written in Ruby. I've already arranged my project so that all public-facing assets are in a public directory. To turn this into a Sinatra application, all I have to do is create an application.rb file, and then add a few lines. Now I can launch the application by running ruby application.rb and view the result in my browser at localhost:4567. Rather than serving up hello world, I want the root path to serve my index.html file. To do this, I'll move my index.html file from the public directory into a directory called views and rename it to use the extension .erb. I'll change the action for the root path so that it renders the ERB file. So far, I'm just back to where I started, but the ERB file allows me to evaluate Ruby, so I can dynamically insert content into the body of my document. Here, I'm calling a templates helper method, which I can declare in my application file. This gets all files inside a directory called templates. For each one, it gets the file name and the contents, then creates a text area tag using the file name as an ID. So if I go ahead and create a file inside the templates directory, its contents will automatically be added inside the body of my index.html file. The good thing about this simple solution is that the operating system ensures that no two template files will have the same file name. Consequently, the text areas that are inserted into the index.html file will each have their own unique ID. However, there is nothing that would prevent you from using the same ID within two separate template files, and consequently you could end up having duplicate IDs within your index.html file. This would mean that your index.html file is not valid HTML, and it might lead to unexpected behavior. So do watch out for this gotcha. In this screencast, I've introduced member functions, which can improve the readability of your X templates, as well as allowing helper functions to be shared. I also showed how the XTemplateFrom function can be used to load a template from an HTML file, rather than having to write HTML snippets in your JavaScript. If you combine these techniques with the topics covered in Part 1, you should be able to use XTemplates to great effect.